Good afternoon. Welcome to all of you here. My name is Leslie Price, and I am the pastor here at Christ Lutheran along with Pastor Howard Stendahl. And together we welcome you today to Christ Lutheran Church. After the services today, there will be a reception in Fellowship Hall. As you leave the sanctuary, you're going to turn to your right and walk all the way down to where you see stairs. You'll turn right again, don't go up the stairs, and walk all the way down that hallway as well. It's quite a journey. It's sort of on the opposite side of the campus. So you'll turn right and right again, walk to the end of the hallway both times, and you'll find yourself in our Fellowship Hall. It's my honor to introduce to you today Pastor Andres Coetzee. Good enough. Good enough. That's our theme for Lent this year. Dr. Kate Buller's good enough, so thank you for that. He has been the pastor at University Presbyterian Church here in San Antonio since January of 2018. He did his graduate and undergraduate work at the University of Stellenbosch in South Africa. He is the recipient of the Lydia Thompson Humanitarian Award, and he was Person of the Year for the Worcester Orville NAACP, and lots of other amazing things you can read about him online, and he's been a joy to get to meet and converse with today, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Leslie, and thank you to Christ Lutheran Church for your hospitality. It doesn't happen often in the world we live that a church will open its doors for people of different faith or no faith and either other denominations. So thank you for your proclamation of welcome, as we need it so badly in the world we live. Which brings us to the person that Judy was. So I now invite you to become quiet and to become mindful of her presence within this space. As today we are gathered to celebrate her life. She was born in Sydney, Australia in 1946. She was raised in South Africa and then moved to the United States in 1972. And here in San Antonio, she lived a full life and died on April 4th, 2022. So today, we celebrate that her life is completed in death. While a global citizen, she was rooted in the present moment and in her community here in San Antonio, where she made a difference that is so evident in the many people that are gathered here today and that are connected with us virtually. So many of you have traveled very, very far to pay tribute to the life of a friend, a sister, and a mentor. As a child of the divine, she was a wife, a mother, a stepmother, a sister, a friend, a colleague, and a world citizen. And today we will recall her as a listener, as a person who was endlessly curious. Very strange to me, the obituary states that she loved change. She was a reader. She was a trusted and a close friend, a soothing counselor. She loved her dogs, gardening, nature, and travel. You know, when I got to know the family during the last weeks of her life, gathered around the bed and reading about her, to me the words of the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh rings true, saying, "The roots of a lasting relationship are mindfulness, deep listening, and loving speech, and a strong community to support you." To me, that was Judy. Yet the reality we all face is that no matter how much we love one another, we must learn to let go. Parents have to let go of children. Even spouses have to let go of one another. And let me make clear, let go is not the same as giving up or giving away. Therefore, we are gathered today to let go, to release Judy, to release her from our continuing need for her love and her confirmation. And yes, even the times we did not receive love or confirmation from her. So today we are invited to bring into the present the things we want to recall, to share common memories, to listen to readings, and to share in silence, and to celebrate her life. As already stated, a reception will follow the service, and the family is looking forward to receive you there. As we give thanks for the life of Judy, I invite you to be present in this moment. I invite you to be true to your own convictions, as that is what Judy wanted. For some people, prayer is important. For others, it is being with their deep thoughts that's important. So however you approach this hour, is it prayer? Is it thought? Or even if it's concentrating on your own breath, let us do so in remembrance and in thanksgiving for Judy. I now invite you into a time of prayer. Please pray with me. Good and gracious Creator, Spirit to all life, we are grateful for the assembly here today. As a people, we come from many different places with many different beliefs and no belief. And each one of us call you by a different name. Are grateful to you from our lived experience. And yet, the one thing we have in common is our gratitude for the life of Judy. Thank you, God, that you have received her into the great cloud of all the witnesses that has gone before us, of all the faithfully departed that is here with us in this space. Therefore, we give thanks. We give thanks for the Creator that is at the heart of all life. We give thanks to the one who cast the planets into space and cradled the sparrow in a nest. For the one who blesses the poor and the broken and stand by the sad and the strong. For the one who dances in the silence and shine in the darkness. I now invite you to allow the prelude to lead you in continued meditation.
Good afternoon. I'm Ruth Bergeron, friend of Judy McCarter's. We gather here today from across San Antonio and the globe to celebrate Judy McCarter. Together we remember her and we grieve the tremendous loss of our friend. She was a mother, a sister, a wife, and a grandmother. She was also an outstanding professional, one who used her writing and communication gifts together with her uncanny insights about people to make things happen in our lives and in our community. We gather to grieve, and at the same time we celebrate Judy's remarkable life. Judy was many things to me: an advisor, a mentor, sometimes a provocateur, but always a friend. Judy was also a teacher, and through these last years of her illness, I've gained some wisdom from her about life and death, healing, and humanity. When I first met Judy in 2007, I was, at least on paper, her boss, having been appointed the interim director of the Center for Medical Humanities and Ethics at the Health Science Center and a successor to Abraham Verghese, whom Judy had been supporting. I was theoretically her boss, but in reality, she was one of my bosses. Imagine, after 5 years of helping Dr. Forland, who's here with us today, and Dr. Verghese build a center to promote ethics education and humanism in medicine, even traveling with them to disseminate this mission to India. After all that, Dr. Verghese was recruited away and Judy assigned to orient another academic infectious disease doctor, this one an internally displaced person, blown out of New Orleans by Hurricane Katrina. I'm quite certain that without Judy's enthusiasm and her unique way of creating a sense of specialness about people and their endeavors, I could not possibly have stepped into my new role. She relentlessly accentuated the positivity and encouraged creativity. She was optimistic and undaunted, traits that I, as an infectious disease doctor, found infectious. In those early days, whenever someone would have the least little success, she'd send around an email declaring that we were all wonderful. Actually, she'd say something like, "Well, aren't you the wonder chicken today?" with exclamation points. She was often hilariously funny, and she didn't take herself or us too terribly seriously. It turned out that Marvin and Abraham had, with Judy's help, assembled a powerful community advisory board. Some of you are here today. And many remember that prominent San Antonians with big personalities like Edith McAllister and Charlie Cheever led the council and promoted the center, which sorely needed funding. I was completely inexperienced at hobnobbing with high-profile individuals. But Judy showed me how to do it and to have fun. She encouraged us to redefine our mission and helped us knit ourselves together. Our mission is something Judy fundamentally believed in. She believed in empathy, compassion, and justice. She believed that doctors should not only be scientists, but also careful listeners and healers. She delighted in the transformation of our students as they experienced our coursework like global health and medicine through literature. She helped us articulate our thoughts and craft the mission statement, which is still our North Star as we enter our third decade. A couple of years before Judy became ill, she asked me if I would serve as her primary care doctor. I hesitated, saying, "But Judy, you're my friend. I shouldn't be your doctor if we're going to be friends." But she insisted, and you can probably imagine her voice saying this. She said, "I think that we can have two different relationships, and we can keep them separate." Well, it was an interesting experiment. As I predicted from her track record of independent thinking, she did not always follow my advice, but she cared about my opinion. I mainly became a guide for her care. I made specialty referrals and picked up the slack. I served as a sounding board for her as she reflected on varying advice from the specialists she needed for her complex illness. One thing I learned from Judy is how quickly a patient sees through insincerity. She knew exactly which doctors truly had her best interest at heart and which ones were going through the motions. I was honored to be entrusted with Judy's best interest, and I promise you, Judy called her own shots, made thoughtful decisions, and lived out her days on her terms and according to her schedule. I love that she created a special recovery room for herself. I had never seen anyone do this, and it turned out to be a wonderful plan. Outside her window were flowers and bushes, carefully planted by Judy and Calvin, who both love making things grow. During Judy's illness, I often tried to bring her things to eat, for example, that usually missed the mark. She didn't think much of my essential oils or the fancy pajamas I tried to give her. What she valued was my presence, my opinions, and the opportunity to share stories. This was never truer than in her final days, when all she really cared about was her list. What list? The list was you, all of you here today. She'd drift in and out of sleep and suddenly ask, "Where's the list? Who's got it now? We need to make sure everyone is on the list." It was the contact list she created for Jonathan, Lynnelle, Yolanda, and Calvin, the people she most wanted by her side at the end, so we'd all know whom to contact to let you know she'd reached the end of her trail, her words, so we could connect with each other and with Judy's final chapter. For me, this idea is Judy's parting lesson. The accomplishments and the stuff we accumulate in our lives are not without significance, but in the end, what gives our lives meaning is our story, interwoven with the stories of our significant others. I will leave you with a poem that both of us loved. A year ago, we realized that we had each more or less memorized it, and we recited it together on the phone one day. I like to imagine Judy in the place described by this poem. The Lake Isle of Innisfree by William Butler Yeats. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there, of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honeybee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the cricket sings. There, midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evening full of the linnet's wings. I will arise and go now, for always, night and day, I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore, while I stand on the roadway or on the pavement's gray, I hear it in my deep heart's core.
I'm Lynnelle Burkett, another friend of Judy. During our lives, we all accumulate friends, some for a single season of our lives, and for, if we're very lucky, sometimes we meet people who we take much of our journey together with. Such was the case for Judy and me. We met each other when we were young women, just beginning our adult lives, when I like to say we were cute young things. And Judy had just emigrated here from South Africa with Roger, who was joining the Health Science Center faculty. I moved all the way from Austin to teach at San Antonio College. And that began what has become a 50-year friendship, exactly 50 years. There were periods when we were less close, times when we were actually developing our professional careers and when Judy was raising Jonathan, and we were quite busy. But our later years, these last few years, have brought us the time to reconnect more fully. In fact, 3 years ago, we were eagerly looking forward to a trip to Hawaii, where, among other things, she hoped to visit the Merton Conservancy in Haiku, Maui, the home of W.S. Merwin, who was one of her favorite poets. We also had carefully planned a 3-week road trip in her camper van through the northern United States for the following fall. And Judy, who loved the new camper van, also had planned a family trip that summer with, I think her brother was coming, and family, and Calvin, and for a family reunion where everybody was going to meet in South Carolina. 3 weeks before our Hawaii trip, all Judy's plans came to a halt on a sunny afternoon in early May. She had gone to the doctor, and I remember she picked me up, and she handed me a sheet of paper, and she said, "I just got this diagnosis from my doctor." I looked at it, did not recognize the words, and Googled, and went, "Oh no." All plans kind of came to a halt as she immediately wanted to begin fighting her cancer diagnosis. Instead, it led to a 3-year confinement to her bed that ended last week. One of the few good things during the last few years, during this time that Judy has been bedridden and fighting cancer with everything she could, has been time for reflection. As Mitch Albom had his Tuesdays with Maury, I came to have my Sundays with Judy. On Sundays, when I was in town, which with the pandemic was most Sundays, I guess, when Calvin had his radio show and was talking gardening with San Antonio, I was reminiscing with Judy. We had a lifetime to cover, so we never ran out of topics. We talked about big things, and we talked about small things. For example, I learned for the first time that before Judy came to the United States, she was a flight attendant for a South African airway and traveling from South Africa to Europe, which led to her love of that continent and many fun layovers in Liechtenstein, which I think Jonathan said she later took him to reminisce on that time during her life. And it also enhanced her love of all of Europe and particularly France. And we had many fun conversations about her travels in France. We talked about how much she grew to love Jonathan's tight-knit group of Central Catholic high school friends, where she made her home the hangout for all of them while they were going through that adolescent period. And I have to tell you that during the last few weeks, all of those friends have either driven or flown from all over the country to San Antonio to say goodbye to Judy and to tell her how much she meant to them during their high school years. And it was such a wonderful thing to get to meet them, and I know how much that meant to her and to Jonathan, because he was here too. We also talked about the books we both loved, as well as movies and television shows, because Judy remained mentally very active until her last few weeks. She reminisced about so many of her experiences as a public relations professional, her wonderful employees, many of whom I see here today, and amazing clients, including the most difficult one, which was accompanying and advising the head of Louie's Cafeteria when he had to go to Killeen, Texas, in the wake of the shooting that occurred there in 1992 that left 24 people dead. She particularly loved working with Dr. and author Abraham Verghese, which, as Ruth mentioned, both here and later at Stanford University, because when he left, he had Judy fly out and continue working with him there. And then she loved working with Ruth, his successor at the UT Center for Medical Humanities and Ethics, who, as she just described, became Judy's both doctor and friend. I came to know through her stories, her family in South Africa and their adventures growing up there. In fact, Judy seemed to have family all over the world, keeping up with family members not only in South Africa, but also in Australia, Ireland, England, and Canada. And Calvin remembered recently when Judy planned her 50th anniversary party for her parents and flew them in from South Africa, and relatives from all of the places I just mentioned flew in to San Antonio to Dream Hill Estates to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Judy's parents. And she also loved returning to South Africa, often taking with her friends and family who she wanted to have come to love that country as she did. Closer to home, though, she also worked tirelessly through her neighborhood associations, both here in Dream Hill Estates and in Rockport, where Calvin and Judy had a condominium. And both groups had the most professional newsletters of any volunteer homeowner groups probably in the city. Our former councilman Bonnie Connor said, if only every community could have a connection like this, we would probably have a much better city. I had hoped to grow old with Judy as a friend. We were born within 2 months of each other. And I know that many of you might be thinking, well, they did it. That's okay. And I thought, though, of Judy as still in her prime, with lots of years to go and lots of trips to make when that May afternoon happened. But I'm sure today she would remind us to live and cherish every day and to live our best lives while we can.
I'm Jack Willome and another friend of Judy's. It's a privilege to share some reflections on my dear friend. And I also appreciate the hospitality of Christ Lutheran Church to have us here today. The last time I was with Judy, she mentioned this service and commented that the first venue that she and Lynnelle had selected wouldn't allow alcohol. And, quote, that wouldn't do. Jonathan said she was referring to relatives coming in from out of town. Although I'm sure we'd met before, my first remembrances of Judy are in 1985. The company I was CEO of was being sued by a prominent plaintiff attorney. I took this very personally and was angry and at my essence was terribly frightened, which of course wasn't okay to acknowledge. I needed to respond to media inquiries and reached out to Judy and her partner, Jim Dublin. Judy is a realist with a gift of presence, meaning that when she was with me, she was totally there with me in the present moment. She helped me look at reality, deal with it pragmatically, develop what I was going to say, and how I was going to relate to the media. This went on for nearly 18 months as she helped me move through this time of crisis. Almost 20 years ago, after I transitioned from my business role, we serendipitously came together and worked collaboratively to help Dr. Abraham Verghese, followed by his successor, Dr. Ruth Bergeron, who just spoke, as they established the Center for Medical Humanities and Ethics. It was in that setting that we got to know each other and work together as friends. Judy always knew intuitively what needed to be done, how to go about doing it, and doing it very skillfully. When she was there, wherever the there was, she was always present, helping pragmatically address reality. And I see this same pattern exemplified in the last 3 years of Judy's life. Nearly 3 years ago, she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Then, a side effect of treatment permanently damaged her kidneys, requiring her to endure dialysis 3 days a week for the duration. She privately grieved over the loss of her kidneys and the extreme burden this placed on her, Calvin, and Jonathan as the cancer ravaged her body. I never heard her whimper, complain, or blame anyone over the loss of her kidneys or the cancer. She handled the reality of this burden very privately and with great dignity. As I see it, Judy determined that she had a job to do, which was to wring as much life as she could out of whatever time was left, one day at a time, and the dialysis was an inconvenient burden that she had to bear as an aspect of reality. Near the onset of the illness, her dear son Jonathan was transferred to the U.S. Embassy in Bogota, Colombia. Jonathan managed to take leave and visit her frequently during these nearly 3 years, and Judy always rose to the occasion. On our last visit 10 days before she passed, she was looking forward to Jonathan's arrival, and he was with her for her last week. During that visit, Judy was peaceful and calm. She told me that she was becoming more and more patient. I'm not anti-anything. There's a message in that for all of us. I sang this chant as our time together came to a close. All shall be well, all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, be well. All shall be well, all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, be well. All shall be well, all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, be well.
Good afternoon. It's good to see everyone here. It's good to be back in San Antonio with my friends, my family, and a lot of folks that I haven't seen in a very long time. My mom was Judy to me. I only ever referred to her as mother or mom in a semi-ironical fashion, and so I'm going to continue to refer to her as Judy during these remarks. We probably should have coordinated our speeches a little bit better because, as Pastor Andres correctly predicted, these people here took about half my material. But to reiterate a couple of things, and it was Luxembourg rather than Liechtenstein, but Luxembourg is wonderful. I've not made it to Liechtenstein. If anyone's got any ideas about whether it's worth going, please find me after. Judy liked to do and did achieve big things in her life. And I think that is the reason I subsequently discovered, did about 10 or 15 drafts of the obit that ran in the Express News. She wanted to record these things, and she wanted not to brag, but to have there be a record of what she, despite some humble beginnings in a far-flung place, had accomplished in her life. One of those was moving across the world twice, the first time before she was 10. Another was building a public relations firm that she was immensely proud of. It was the biggest in the region, and that did a lot of very good, important work, including in the aftermath of that shooting. My favorite accomplishment of hers was helping organize the building of the largest margarita in history, a Guinness World Record that was done on the river walk. If you see some guys in their mid-40s here, those are probably folks from Central Catholic who helped us do that. And given that we were about 16 at the time, probably had no business being there. But it was a signal achievement for all of us in addition to the margarita being built. But in addition to doing big things that she was proud of, I think the thing that most defined her and that she was most good at were small things. The interpersonal relationships with individuals, growing people, helping develop people, and helping people realize their own potential. Key to that was being happy at home. And I remember the day of her wedding with Calvin, we sat out on the front steps of the cabin that she was staying in, and she just confided in me nervously, "Do you think I should go through with this?" And given that I was, I think, 18 or 19 at the time, I thought that was a question she would have resolved already. But she did go through with it, and she had a joy in her life after that she had never had before. So it was a wonderful decision that Calvin and Judy made together to get married. I remember sitting with her at our dining table one night with several empty wine bottles in front of us, and she just told me, she's like, "I've never been happier than I am right now with Calvin." And that was wonderful. Another thing that brought her joy was family. And my uncle Michael described her as the glue that knit family in Australia and Europe and Asia and Africa and Canada all together, and that no one else could have done that. And we're all going to be in a very difficult spot now, having to try and pick up those pieces now that she's not there to do it. But corresponding with these family members, visiting them every few years, seeing them where they lived and hosting them when they visited here, brought her immense joy. It persuaded her to put a deck on the house that subsequently became, as was mentioned, the launching pad for so many of our high school get-togethers. I remember her also telling me one night that a neighbor had said, "You know, I never told you this, but back when your son was in high school, he used to have parties. And we could hear them." And she said, "And you wouldn't believe this neighbor's face when I told him, 'Yes, I know, I was there.'" But it created a community with my friends that they recognized and felt and were overjoyed by. And it is something that has helped us stay together through difficult times and good times, and something for which I'm eternally grateful for her. And then, lastly, there's my family that she brought joy to, and that I think brought her quite a bit of little joy to. My wife Shannon, my daughter Moira, who got to spend a lot of unexpected time with Judy in 2020 when we evacuated Bogota for what we thought would probably be about 2 weeks and ended up being 7 months. We stayed with Judy and Calvin in the house, and my daughter got to spend more time with her mom, or more time with my mom than in that 7 months than I spent with all of my grandparents combined in my entire life. So one good thing that came out of the pandemic was that. And I think we will conclude there, but I will just finish with something that Moira told me that she thought we should say. Judy was a good mom and grandmother, a wonderful person, and we loved her a lot. So it took the four of us probably about half an hour to say exactly that, but I hope that's the way everyone here feels, and I expect it is. So thank you all for coming.
We will now enter a time of silent prayer in which we invite you to bring your own prayers, your own thoughts. I will lead us in a small, short liturgy, but especially during this time of prayer, I invite you to focus your prayers and your energy in thanksgiving for the life of Judy. Also prayers of comfort to Calvin, son and daughter-in-law Jonathan and Shannon and Moira, stepson Stacy and granddaughter Avery, and stepdaughter Jessica and grandchildren Kylie and Caden, and also siblings who are here, Michael, Sean, and Deirdre. As we gather, we now know that all our laughter and all our sadness is safe now in the hands of God. All our anger, all our gladness, safe now in the hands of the divine. All our stories and all our memories, safe now in the hand of the Spirit, that's the being of all life. Those we remember and those we love, safe now and present with us in this space. Let us enter a time of silent prayer. As somebody myself who's from another country, I think when you die in another country from the one which you were born in, your soul has to rise a little higher to make all the connections of your life. So therefore, I would like to share a little of South Africa, a land Judy loved. And growing up in South Africa, although we are white, you cannot help that the traditions of the continent rubs off on you. So the tradition in African traditional religion is that people believe that when you pass on to the next life, that you move from the living to the living dead. And as long as people remember you, your life, your stories, the person will remain in the living dead. Therefore, Judy will be with us for a long time to come, as we not only remember her stories and the memories, but as we actually build it into all that is yet to come. To me, what rings true today is a poem from the South African writer Antjie Koch from Country of My Skull, who wrote, "Beloved, do not die. Do not dare die. I, the survivor, wrap you in words so that the future inherits you. I snatch you from the death of forgetfulness. I tell your story, complete your ending. You who once whispered beside me in the dark." So therefore, each sunrise, each sunset, we will remember Judy. As long as we live, she lives too, for she is now and always a part of us, as I believe she lives eternally in wholeness. So we are looking forward, and the family is looking forward, to receive you at the reception after the service, which is actually a continuation of the celebration as we give thanks for the nourishment that sustains our living. And please know that our remembering of Judy is not confined to the here and now, but it is something that we carry with us in the future, to build that and all that is yet to come, the good and the bad, all that make up our journey forward. So therefore, go in peace. Let's come together and work for the common good, as together with the cloud of witnesses that has gone before us, including Judy, we have the ability to build a better tomorrow, a more compassionate, kind, and generous world, the one that Judy left for us. And let the people say, Amen.